Well, hi everybody, we're back. Not in our regular studio, but satellite.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right.
We're in a little satellite location. It's kind of like, the USGA or something at all their different events during the summer. Every time we watch them, they're at a different golf course. So
That's right.
we're here at a different location than we normally are. And we're going to talk, Jeff, about just some of the stories that were told to me for the magazine that, we produced this year and some of the themes that were around that. And so I want to start with what really is the first story in the magazine, Ben Martin. You ever met Ben?
I've never met Ben.
Yeah.
He's played at my club, and I was out there. I think we may have even played the game the same day one day.
Oh, yeah.
And but I didn't actually meet him. So.
Well, Ben is somebody who was introduced to us really through College Golf Fellowship. He came up through that great ministry among college golfers. And the guys at College Golf Fellowship a lot of times give us some good advice about players whose faith is firm and they're growing. And so Ben was pretty open about pretty much his life in college. College these days, it's almost like what happens in college stays in college. It's like a 4-year-long Las Vegas trip, And so kids don't always make the best decisions.
Sure.
And they set their faith aside, or they're going to decide on that a little bit later. And Ben was pretty open that he was not this wild life necessarily, kind of like I just cast it, but certainly a life that said, I'm taking care of my golf right now, and I'm taking care of my school right now, and we'll take care of faith when it comes up.
Right.
But we don't see that just among young people, right?
Well, I think that's exactly right, and for a guy who's just graduated his oldest daughter this last weekend and sending her off to college, it's that it is that sense in which, what is this going to be like? Is this going to be a reflection of my faith, or is this going to be a sabbatical from my faith in some ways? And I thought that was fascinating that he looked at it in that way.
Yeah. Well, I've seen, and you've seen, men and women who've taken 40-year sabbaticals,
exactly,
50-year sabbaticals,
exactly.
And they get later in life and they say, maybe I better think about this. In fact, you and I challenge people to do their spiritual due diligence.
Correct.
And everything they've poured into the rest of their life, why don't you take some time and really look at Scripture and Jesus and faith in that way? Because really what we're supposed to have is a different perspective. And you alluded to it kind of when we introduced this series from a passage in 2 Corinthians. What is that passage?
Well, I probably quote this as much as I quote about anything in terms of leading Links Fellowships over the last 15 or 20 years, because it's so profound. It's this sense in which, and I'll read it for you, it's actually Paul. He's talking to the church at Corinth, and he's saying, look, we're really struggling. We're suffering. In fact, he calls themselves, we're bondservants for your sake. And many are coming to know Jesus. And then he says this, he says, but we don't lose heart. Though our outer man is decaying, our inner man is being renewed day by day. He goes on to say, momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison, while we are not looking at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Now that also really hinges on another passage that another apostle wrote, Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 4. He said, arm yourselves to suffer. Now that's crazy. Yeah, arm yourselves to suffer. And I think in some ways going through the college period and maybe not entering into that same kind of lifestyle, not that you don't have interaction, but refusing to kind of go down that way, kind of that Daniel perspective of I'm not going to do those kinds of things, eat that kind of food, do those kind of things. It's powerful and profound. He says, arm yourselves to suffer, because he who suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. In other words, there is a causality when we choose to suffer for Christ's sake, and that is what Jesus said, pick up your cross. There is a result in it, and he goes on to say, so that we can live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. In other words, through suffering, I think it gets our eyes off of the temporal. I think that's what both Paul and Peter are saying. It gets our eyes off the temporal and onto things that actually matter. So suffering is in fact, now catch this, suffering can actually be from God. God uses this. You say, well, God doesn't cause cancer. God doesn't. I won't get into this, we'll get into Reformed theology and a lot of different things about the sovereignty of God here. But I will say that God uses these things, uses these afflictions, whether it be Ben's situation in college, whether it be even what you're going through now, Jeff, uses these things to pull our mind back to a place of sanity, which is really, oh yeah, I don't really belong here. I think just that sense of I'm here, I need to be a light, I need to be engaged, and yeah, I need to be right in the middle of a hurting world, but in an ultimate sense, I don't belong here. And that's what those verses really speak to me. And it moves us to a place of really focusing on what things do matter while we're here.
Let me ask you, before we close here, kind of maybe one little practical step that someone can take that turns their thinking from world-focused, light momentary afflictions focused,
Right.
to things eternal and above.
Yeah, on a pragmatic scale, I'd go, first thing that pops into my mind would be Colossians 3. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things below. Well, what do we do to set our mind? You hang out with brothers. You're not always in the world. You're going to hang out with brothers. When I'm with my brothers and we're the Links Fellowship, I mean, we are talking about things, hopefully, that are not political, hopefully that are not all the litany of things that everybody wants to talk about. We're talking about eternal matters. Prayer and spending time in the Word. Those three primary, you hear all the time, I spend time in fellowship. It sounds like things you do because you're a Christian. No, you do these things so that you can get your mind in a place where it actually can be effective in a culture that's desperately desirous to see something other than what they see every day.
Perfect.
So,
thanks. Well, we hope that's a good start for you. And when we come back next time, we'll talk about the story of another person from this year's magazine.
let's do it.